Hello and welcome to another managerial special from the On Sport podcast. I'm Craig Savage, and with me as always is Mr. Daniel Cody. Today we are talking about the appointment of Kolo Toure as the new Wigan manager. He's replaced Leam Richardson at the helm during the World Cup break. Let's start with the previous manager, Leam Richardson. He took over at August 2020 or whenever the restart was, when it all went completely pear-shaped for Wigan, had the points deduction, went into administration, and had that little bit of stability in the end.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many bizarre things around this, which we'll talk about, honestly, obviously. But yeah, I do initially just feel a bit sorry for him, just for the way it's all transpired, because obviously, as you say, he took over at the end of that season where they'd come back under Paul Cook. They nearly completed the Great Escape. We should mention that as well. But then they came into League One in administration, a bit like we had then a bit later with Derby a year after. Are they going to be in business? Are they going to start? Are they going to have a squad? What position are they going to be in? And he kept them in League One against probably a lot of the odds. Most people thought they were going to go down, and he managed to keep them up, which was an incredible effort. Then the following year to come back and win the title in League One, to play brilliant football along the way. I mean, I was there the final day when they won it at Shrewsbury. It was a brilliant atmosphere. They ran riot in the end, and they thoroughly deserved to go up. And then this year, not really backed in the summer. It didn't really seem like they were making a lot of signings. I think they were one of the last clubs in the Championship to sign a player, and hadn't added too much, particularly in terms of firepower during the window. We always thought at the start of the season they might be a bit short of goals, and it proved that way. Obviously, they fell into the relegation zone the game before he was sacked. They were doing pretty well up to that point, and they were competitive. I mean, even now, they're in 22nd place, but they're 8 points off the playoffs. That's the way the Championship is this year. It's the tightest we've ever seen. And then you add into the mix that he was sacked 16 days after signing a new 3-year contract. And you just wonder what on earth is happening. And I don't know whether that was just so he got a payoff, but we had reports the weeks before about Wigan's players being paid late, some of the staff not being paid on time. It just seems a little bit off in so many areas. But for me, overall, he'll be remembered as a Wigan hero. The stories of things he did behind the scenes when they were in administration, obviously the fact that he was credited by Charlie Wyke himself with saving his life when he collapsed on the training pitch. He was so much more than just the Wigan manager. He was a huge part of Wigan Athletic, the community, and the success. And for him and for James Beattie, who's gone as well, they both deserve huge credit because they did a marvellous job at that club.
Yeah, and incoming now is a name that for the Premier League years is a Premier League legend, former Arsenal, Liverpool, and Celtic player Kolo Toure. At Manchester City, obviously. Kolo Toure is now the new Wigan manager, a statement from the club. He's been hired as for a 3.5-year deal from Leicester City. He was part of their coaching staff under Brendan Rodgers. It also arrives at Wigan is Kevin Betsy and Ashvir Jahal. Kevin Betsy was the Crawley Town manager at the start of this season, so that's an interesting move in itself. All three will fly to Turkey for a mid-season training camp. A statement, obviously, from the chief executive says, "We are delighted that Kolo has become the new manager of Wigan Athletic, and the board's pleased that he's the man to take us forward. We've received a high caliber of applicants for the manager's job in recent weeks, including his brother, in a very thorough recruitment process as we look to appoint the right person for the role. Clearly, Yaya wasn't good enough. From the earliest conversation we had with Kolo, it was evident to us that brought into the phase of the club with his enthusiasm, knowledge, and an immense desire to work and be part of Wigan Athletic, shining throughout the process. There is no doubt that this appointment is an exciting one for the football club. Kolo is a manager who wants to play a positive brand of football and will strive every day to make the club stronger." So a season of new managers in the Championship has taken another turn with Kolo Toure, obviously only was a backroom staff first team coach under Leicester City. Now is taking the big role as a different club. Didn't see this one coming.
No, didn't see this one coming. And as we mentioned, it's part of the trend this year, isn't it, for new younger coaches to come in with no or very little management experience. And as we mentioned a minute ago, he's got massive shoes to fill. A fun stat for you very quickly. In this manager special and the Luton one we did last, we've now covered all 3 EFL managers of the season from last year, which I just thought was quite interesting. But Kolo Toure is in, and he's got a pretty good grounding, to be fair. Obviously, you mentioned he is a legendary player in the Premier League years, was an invincible, won the title at two different clubs, won a League Cup and, was it Europa League and League Cup runner-up at Liverpool, won the league at Celtic. I mean, he's got a brilliant reel, even won the AFCON with Ivory Coast, his home nation as well. So we are talking about a serial winner. And we are talking about someone who's had a good coaching grounding as well, working under Brendan Rodgers at Celtic and Leicester, working again a little bit internationally with the Ivory Coast. But it's always a risk. And we've seen examples that have gone both ways this year in a championship already. Obviously, there's another one of those that's already left to go back to Scotland in Mick Beale, which will probably be our next manager special as well. There's some irony in that one. But it's just, it continues what has been a bizarre and very busy season on the championship manager front. As you said, I don't really know what to make of it. We're working on gut instinct with a lot of these, but from the level he's coached at and the people he's worked with, everyone seems to talk well of him, but he's not one of those where, like the Mick Beale situation, where a lot of people came out and said, oh, he's a fabulous coach, he's always worked. We've not really heard a lot about him. He's gone under the radar, essentially. The only thing you see is him on the bench with Brendan Rodgers sometimes at Leicester. So I'm not sure exactly what to expect. It's a big leap of faith to give him a 3.5-year deal, although we know that doesn't mean much because Liam Richardson got the same deal, 3-4 weeks before he got sacked. And he's got a tricky start on paper. So I think the only word I can use to sum it up without offering any great insight is it's really interesting. And as you mentioned, his brother was at one point touted for the job. There's been loads of names mentioned as well. But Wigan have taken their time, so they must really feel this is right.
Yeah, they have had a lot of time, to be fair. Obviously, the breaks happened, and it was probably one of the most surprising sackings, as said, considering that the contract renewal and all that stuff. But obviously with Kolo, I don't know what to expect. This is a very hard one. So, how do you think he'll do? Because we don't know what style he has. He's obviously worked under like fantastic managers in Roberto Mancini and Arsene Wenger and Brendan Rodgers. So I don't know what kind of style he would want. I don't know what kind of formation he would want. So it has to. Kolo Toure obviously sold it fantastically well for the Wigan board to say, yeah, come be our new manager.
Yeah, and you have to think, given the time it's taken to make the appointment and some of the other names going for it, there must have been extensive conversations and there must be some sort of real belief from the Wigan board that this is the way to go. Maybe he's got a Nathan Jones style PowerPoint, who knows? But he is
Nobody will have a PowerPoint like Nathan Jones.
But look, he's a brilliant player. And if he's half that as a manager, he's going to do a good job at Wigan. I mean, you mentioned about the style of play. He's worked under a lot of managers, as you say, that play very different styles of football. But one of the things that he's got to work with Wigan is the fact that they haven't really got a huge goal threat in the Championship. They haven't got that Championship goal scorer. They have a real counter-attacking threat. We saw for the most part this season already under Liam Richardson, and even to an extent at times in League One. They're much more threatening away from home. They're really good on the counter-attack, and they soak up pressure a bit better. When the onus is on them at home at a stadium which, with the greatest of respect, they don't manage to garner a big, ferocious, intimidating atmosphere for away teams. You don't...
Or crowd.
Well, that's the thing, because it's a stadium that's probably bigger.
It's a rugby league town.
Yeah, and so many of those towns are. And as a result, with respect, it's not often more than half to 2/3 full. And that means that you're not going to get that big, intimidating, raucous atmosphere to drive you on at home. And without that, and without the real attacking quality to dominate a game, it is a tricky season for them. They were brilliant last year, and I still feel Liam Richardson was harshly treated. But until the January window, he's going to have to make sure they get results. And whether that's boring draws, 1-0s. We mentioned it with West Brom and Corberan. Until you can get to work in the window, just get results. And looking at the 4 games before the January window opens, I mean, the first game back,
very tricky. They're very, very tricky.
That's one way of putting it. Millwall away, the first game, is just about the hardest away game to start with. Sheffield United obviously flying, Middlesbrough under Michael Carrick flying, and then Sunderland at home massive. Obviously now with this one, all 3 of the promoted clubs from last year have a different manager than they started the season with. And then he goes into a run of games of Sunderland, Hull, Luton in the FA Cup, Cardiff, games that are winnable and games that in the league are going to be crucial to whether they can survive or not. So while I don't really know what to expect, I feel the first 3 or 4 games are a bit of a free hit. And then I think the January window is going to be absolutely massive.
Yeah, obviously he's got his 4 tough games. You said, how many points out of those 12 do you think he will get?
Not many, but I don't think it will actually matter because we've seen how tight the league is. It's going to be a tricky one. I can't see them getting points out of those first 3 games because the squads of the other sides, if they're at their best, are far too superior. I feel he has to get to the Sunderland game, try and get a result there, and then the games in January, that schedule's massive. You look at the end of the January window as well, going into sort of February, and you've got games like Huddersfield, Bristol City, Preston, sides that maybe are beatable on their day. And for me, it's about adding attacking power. Can he go to Brendan Rodgers and ask for a favour from Leicester? Can he go to some of his former clubs? Because if we're going to work in tight restrictions financially at the moment because of the much maligned situation, according to the media, then maybe 2 or 3 loan players could be the difference. So I wonder if that's going to have an impact as well.
Obviously, the main question, last 2 questions I always ask is, how do you think Wigan will do for the rest of the season? And do you think Kolo Toure will last 3.5 years? We already kind of know the second half of the question. That will be probably be no. And that's not on Kolo. That's just the football business. So
certainly the championship.
That's it. It's certainly the championship. But how do you think Wigan will do for the rest of the season under Kolo?
It's going to be tricky. I honestly think it hinges on whether they get a striker. If they do, and he can score goals regularly, then I think they've got a great chance. If not, I do fear trouble. I think Huddersfield below them and Blackpool below them are potentially candidates to stay there. We have got a few like Rotherham, only 3 points ahead, albeit 6 or 7 places up the league. It's so hard to predict that bottom of the table. Are other clubs going to panic? We've seen Cardiff have left Mark Hudson to the end of the year. We're waiting to see what so many new managers are going to do there. Trying to look, I think Bristol City in 7th bottom are the first team up that haven't replaced their manager yet. So there's so much upheaval for now, exactly. There's so much upheaval. There's so many changes down there. I don't know what to predict. If I had to put my neck on the line, I think he's going to get a loan star from somewhere, whether it's Brendan Rodgers, whether it's Arsenal, City, someone like that. I'm going to stick to what I said at the start of the season. Wigan on the counter will get enough points and they'll just about stay up. Kolo will then be a success, but I'm going to put a caveat on that. If any more of this wages nonsense and off the pitch nonsense carries on, I mean, his hands are going to end up being tied. I just hope for Wigan fans it doesn't happen because the last one was a catastrophe and never should have happened.
But surely he will get reassurance that none of this happens.
You'd like to hope so. But for a lot of managers, as we see youngsters, and you mentioned Rob Edwards stepping up to Watford, we covered that in the last one as well. Is these managers thinking, am I going to get another chance? Do I have to take the one that comes? And if Kolo's gone for 3 or 4 other jobs before and not got a look in, is he thinking, I've not got a choice but to take it? I hope that that's all just an assumption from the outside. And I'm not saying that is the case, but I hope he's given a chance and I hope he is a success because he was a great player, wasn't he? Let's be honest.
He was a great defender, smashed Arsene Wenger in training according to on his trial, according to Ray Parler. So that's always a great story to hear. Kolo Toure's trial at London Coney. Right, that is our video on the hiring of Kolo Toure.
Hang on a minute, you're not getting out that easy. Are Wigan staying up? Don't you dare try and get away with that.
No, not for me.
Oh.
No. It's a tough one because there's quite a few poor sides down there at the moment that I've not been impressed with, to be honest. And I think some of you obviously were desperate to get to this break. I feel Wigan might just, if they don't get anyone in January, I feel they might come up a bit short. Looking at them, I think Huddersfield will go down. I could probably see Hull going down, and probably I would. Well, I'll probably say Wigan as well. But we never know. I'm always wrong in these sort of predictions. So prove me wrong again, Kolo. That is the hiring of Kolo Toure as the new manager of Wigan Athletic. Let us know in the comments how you think he'll get on at the D&W. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3. And we'll see you next time.